I'm real sorry, guys, but on this occasion, Professor Blair was wrong. I'll explain why. Okay. If you don't know what I'm talking about this study. Now, if you're anything like me and have just a little understanding of airflow like I do, you've probably read every bit of literature that's out there. Then the realization when you actually start testing the theories hits. There's so much bullshit out there. And please, guys, don't think I'm just having a shot at Dr. Blair. He even stated in his study that he was inadequately or dangerously inadequate, I think it was. Something like that. If you've read the study, you know what I'm talking about. So he'd already preempt this just to say this is what CFD shows. The problem is people in the industry share this study around and use it as gospel. And they appeal to that authority, which is a fallacy in general, and this only highlights why it's a fallacy, because there's so many mechanisms that CFD is ignoring. And again, no shot at the good professor. I love his work. I've read lots of his stuff, but in this aspect, they actually fall short because they're not measuring the first, second, third, fourth harmonic elements. They're not measuring inertial ram air, and it's not a steady state flow. This is a highly turbulent active boundary layer with a timed mechanism, meaning it's going anywhere from 60 to 80 times a second, if not more, depending on the RPM. Open, close, open, close, open, close, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. So we have to manage all those pressure waves, and those pressure waves alone are worth 5 to 12%. So this really highlights why you got to be really, really careful about what you read and then apply. Okay, so that's my rant on the topic. Now let's get into why. Let's get into some of the mechanisms why we shouldn't put too much weight on this study and take it as gospel. So the first thing we're going to look at is obviously the bell shapes that they tested. And here they are. Now looking at those Bellmouths, pretty much anyone with a bit of common sense will say, yeah, the bottom one, that's always going to do better. And if you flow test that, you'll pretty much get the same result. But, and here's the but, and it's a huge but, engines aren't steady state flow. So we've got to look at the whole picture, every mechanism. And the biggest mechanism obviously is wave tuning. The pressure wave that's coming back up and how that reacts with the radius. And this is why a simple radius will always beat any elliptical or airfoil Bellmouth, and I mean out of the water. I'm going to do some diagrams on the whiteboard and show you exactly why. Let's do it. Okay, so we've got the whiteboard, I've done a couple of diagrams, and I just want to focus on two very obvious mechanisms. The first one is obviously velocity, and you'll see why a cone like this is obviously going to do way better on a flow bench than a steady state flow over a parallel tube with a radius. And they tested a parallel tube, if you have a look at the diagrams. And the problem with anything parallel is it doesn't work in ICE engines. We don't want anything parallel because its time over distance creates restriction. That is creating more restriction just by looking at it. But here's the problem. As soon as we start looking at transitional length, so this is our harmonic element now, our wave tuning. So when the valve closes, and there's other ones, but we'll just stick with the closing wave, we're going to get a pressure wave that flies up the runner at 1100 feet per second. Again, there's temperature compensations in here. That's why we're going to look at Mach limits and the temperature of the intake air, because that affects the speed of sound dramatically. But let's just focus on this for now, just 1100 feet per second. As it shoots up, it's going to interact with what I call the transitional length of the radius and a change in CSA. This does it all in about 10 millimeters, where this one does it all in almost the length of it. And I've just done a quick breakdown. It's obviously a little bit bigger than it needs to be just to make the point here. But what we find is the air is slowing. And the wave that's coming up the runner has to interact with more molecules, more molecules, more molecules. Now, if you've ever, gone to the beach or a river or whatever, you throw a rock in the pond, you'll see the ripples spread out. Now, the ripples are always stronger at the nucleus where it goes in, but the more it interacts with the rest of the fluid, the more energy we lose. Runners are no different to that. So the more molecular mass, the more molecules we have in the top of the runner, one, it robs us of energy, and two, there's no clear snap in signal. So it's not going to send anything back down properly. And we see this in exhaust wave tuning. So anyone who's played with exhaust or knows anything about it, we want a clear size change in our stepped headers, multiple stepped headers in F1 and all that sort of stuff. The idea is the velocity that's coming down will hit this point. As soon as it goes bigger, it stalls for a second. As it stalls, it causes a negative wave to shoot back up the exhaust pipe. And if it's timed right, it'll hit the exhaust valve or it'll hit the chamber, the cylinder, at the same time as the inlet valve is opening when if we did everything right with this, we have a positive wave landing at the intake valve. So this positive on one side, negative on the other, helps evacuate the cylinder and improves our volumetric efficiency through that mechanism or through that period of overlap. So very, very important. And sorry, back to this. Again, we've created restriction over time, but now if we look at the average velocity, so we know we're going to lose in wave tuning, and wave tuning is everything when it comes to primary induction length. That's where all your horsepower is, even in boosted engines, and you've heard me talk about this before. Look at all engines as boosted. All we're doing is changing the density. So really, when it comes to boost, all you need to do is compensate for temperature. That is the key. Because temperature is what influences the speed of sound and will change the rate of this wave. So if I take the average of this one, we're 240 feet per second, and just under the radius, we're 240 feet per second. So the average hasn't changed. But if we do some quick numbers on this one, we're not even 50 at the bell, 48 feet per second, and down it goes. So now when we do the average of this runner, we're only 168.4 versus 240. Not saying 240 is right, I'm just giving you an example. I'm not giving out exact numbers because every combination needs a different velocity index at the bell depending on how close the runner length is to optimum. Or if it's around optimum, it's going to be anywhere from 150 to 195 depending on what you're doing with it. But if it's not optimal, then you have to close it up to create that inertial length because you don't have as much of it. And hopefully that makes sense. So if you run a shorter runner, you want to close the CSA. So you don't just, which a lot of people do, they go, oh, the engine needs a 9-inch runner. And say that's our runner profile. We're 285 square inches at the window. We're 4.5 at the opening of the plenum. We've done some calculations. This is what it needs, 9-inch, but we only need, say, 5-inch. And that CSA there might be, say, I don't know, 3.5. But that's not actually the right way to do it. We're not actually compensating for the loss of runner length. What we actually have to do when we cut the runner shorter is also make the taper narrower. This will help improve the average velocity of that runner now because we've lost the top part of that mechanism. And it's this mechanism that helps feed our inertia mechanism. So if we look at these two, this one is 42% down on average velocity across the distance of the bell runner, whatever you want to call it. So straight away, that's not going to make any horsepower, nor is it even going to make any torque because the average airspeed is so low. And this is what we've got to get right. And then we obviously got to look at the actual runner length. Where is the runner starting? So it's shortened the runner dramatically. Like we can see the actual runner length of this is from just under the radius all the way to the bottom. But due to the shape of this one, really you could say it's starting to end at 55 or somewhere. So that bell, you've pretty much taken runner length out of the equation and shortened it while ruining your wave tuning. And this is why it doesn't work. Well, hopefully that helps, guys, and that's why we don't look at things in isolation. Remember, the bell or the radius only needs to be big enough to control the vena contractor. Cheers.